Hello there, sword friends. Today I'm going to do a video where I talk about how to fix some things with a MacGyverish kind of solution on this Dynasty Forge Musha series katana. Now, I did a review on this sword some time ago, and it just basically has some problems that you would commonly see in a katana. It's a great example for me to show how I would fix them. I do want to put the caveat in that these are very MacGyverish kind of fixes. They're not the best way to do things, and I'm sure there are more efficient, effective, and basically if you know how to do it correctly, don't bother watching this. And if you know a better way to do it, throw it in the commentary down below, whether it be a link to somebody else's channel or an explanation of how to do it. This is just kind of quick fixes that somebody not particularly handy like myself could do to address some of the common things that happen with these types of swords. So I've got a loose Kashira up here, and it hasn't quite come undone all the way, but it will eventually, and I'm going to secure that. That's the plan. Then the Tsuba is actually pretty tight, but I'll show an example of how I would tighten it, or some examples. The sai is relatively loose as well, so I'm going to do an example of how to shim it. And then the Kurikata over here is loose as well, so I'm going to secure that down and do my best to make it aesthetically slightly better than it is. Now again, I want to point out that these are not going to be the best way to fix things. Ideally, you would send this off to somebody that knows how to resolve them. I don't think that gluing on the Kashira, which is what you're going to see, is the greatest example of what to do. There are probably better ways to do it. And again, it bears reminding that these are very MacGyverish, homeowner-y, subpar solutions, but they'll work in a pinch. And if you have minimal tools, like me, or minimal skill, more importantly like me, then it's a reasonable way to get stuff done. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take apart the sword. I don't know how well the camera situation I have is actually going to work here to do this, but the first thing I want to do is actually address the Kashira area up here, and I think it's just going to be easier to do that if I don't have the handle on. So this particular example has one Makugi pin. Let's see if I can get it actually on camera here. So I've got one Makugi pin right here, and I think that's all that's on there, but we'll see how hard this is to take off once I actually get the pin out. Now, oftentimes in these kits, you have the pretty useless little hammer, this thing right here. I really very rarely have luck using these doofy little hammers here. They bend, they don't focus in your camera. Come on, there we go. So this little thing right here, there's a few different ways to use it. Let's see. So first I can, this little bit right here, see, they always just unscrew in all the wrong ways, but, so this little thing comes out of the top and it spins around, and this is shitty and I don't like it, but anyway, it gives you something to work with. I'm basically taking this little doowacky here, I'm pinching it between my legs, as is the safest way to do swords, and I'm giving a little tap to this thing, and you can already see this hammer thing comes loose, it spins around. It's just shit. And if I take this and try to push hard, then naturally I will drive it right into my right into the meat of my hand. Worst stupid tool. Oh, fantastic. Is it? No. So Makugi comes out, and joy of macro lenses. You can see it's made out of what looks like a chopstick, so it's kind of coming undone, something that should probably be replaced. In this particular example, I don't see another Makugi, another one of these little pegs kind of stuffed through the handle, so I'm just going to try and take it out. Now, there is a way to do this. Ideally, you kind of set this on your hand and kind of give it a thump, and I haven't found that the traditional way of taking these things apart ever actually works. So I end up having to push hard and do it. Well, you can see what I'm doing. So with the tug, I can, ooh, my, okay. So, I don't know. Now, this Dynasty Forge piece was actually somebody, I got it secondhand. It was a gift, and so I don't know if this came from Dynasty Forge or not, but this paper is actually, it's on here pretty good, and it came out in one piece, which is not so bad either. So that's feeling rattling inside this, then basically this is kind of a solution for it. Now, I don't like to see it from a vendor. I don't like to see this type of thing kind of out of the box this way. I'd rather that the handle and the Nakago fit, but this is a kind of a paper wrapped tang or some sort of tape or something like that, and you could certainly wrap a Nakago in this, and then it kind of basically fills the gaps and tightens things up and does that just fine. So it's a reasonable solution. In this particular case, I would say you can see that the end is wrapped here, and this all came out in actually one piece, which is surprising. Very often they don't, and the paper gets left in there, and then you have to fumble and futz around with it to get it out. Anyway, I'm going to set this off to the side for the moment. All right, so with the handle off, you can kind of already see my problem. That is that the Kashira has come undone, and it's really not that great. So my solution to this is I'm going to glue it back on, and that's really it. Now, the better way to do this would be to send it off to a professional, pay them the appropriate amount of money, and have it rewrapped entirely with basically new material. Sometimes that means even sending your whole sword off and having a new handle made, because maybe this isn't even usable. That said, for me, quick dojo solution, glue the sumbitch back on and call it a day. I'm going to hold this under my macro lens here, and forgive the odd camera work here. I'm not having a whole lot of luck, but this macro lens will hopefully let you get close and see some of the details where the other equipment I have might not. So you can kind of see that basically this part of the knot has come off, and I've just stuffed it around, and it's not in the original shape that it was, but I'm going to call this good enough, or marginally better than duct tape. Now, my choice for this kind of stuff is often this Gorilla Glue schmutz right here. This is, well, I don't know if any of this is actually usable anymore. It seems like the Gorilla Glue has Gorilla Glued itself together. So I don't know if I'm going to have any luck using this. This is why it's good for scars. When it dries, it doesn't really come off, unfortunately. Anyway. No such luck on that. The alternative that I have is this Dyna Grip stuff, and I've used this a little bit, mostly for construction material related things. It takes quite a bit longer to dry, but it foams less and tends to peek out of the edges a little bit less. As an example of the workmanship of Gorilla Glue, here is my Iaito, or one of them, and you can see that it is worn. This is a Tazando piece, and I caught this before it really went all kittywampus, so the knots and everything are still reasonably done. But you can see that Gorilla Glue is poking out of the bottom here, and it's poking around the sides. And so if you get an adhesive that bubbles up a little bit, then basically it can bubble out and look unsightly. I'm not terribly disappointed with how this particular one looks, and it's held up on there really well. So Gorilla Glue does well, but if this kind of bubbly schmutz bothers you, then maybe Gorilla Glue isn't the right choice. How can I do this on camera? Do that. Super dexterous. Okay. So I've certainly done this at expert levels. Look at how clean this is. Ooh, so good. Okay, so you can obviously see that big chunks of schmutz have come out of here. Exactly what's expected. I'm going to just try to take this tool and wipe some of the big gobs off, or make it much worse. It's tough to say what's going to happen here. Probably much worse. All right, so I got most of the garbage cleaned up. What I'm going to do now is try to take this stuff coming under here and tuck it under. And I'm not going to be very gingerly with it. It's probably going to rip or fray. But I don't really care. Now, you might have noticed that I swear profusely while I do this, and that's because I fucking hate doing this. I don't like or take any joy from repairing these swords. I'd rather not do it, and that's generally why I pay somebody else to do it. But in a pinch, or just to give a sword a little bit more legs, I will futz around and try to make do. And so, yes, I imagine if you take more joy in customizing and futzing around with this kind of stuff, more power to you. I certainly wish I had the desire to do it, because I would save a lot of money. But yes, it just brings out the angry bear in me more than anything else. So then you can kind of take some of this stuff and take the frays and shove them around, glue them down. This knot is not going to hold. Oh, you can see how beauteous this work is. I'll wipe this off and clamp it in a second. But it'd be nice to do something with these this knot over here, so I'm going to try and tuck it underneath here. So here is the knot that I will then try to glue down. I'll probably put a dab of super glue on a few spots, which I want to be very cautious with because super glue starts to get kind of sharp on the hands. But anyway, here is work that is nothing to be proud of. This knot is obtrusive and terrible, but it will probably do. Now I'm going to take some super glue. There we go. Gluing some bits here. Let's stick some schmutz in here, down there, in there. So this is another downside. This stuff is going to get in the little pores of your fittings, and it's just all around a pain in the ass. So again, you know, try to clean it off. It's probably easier to clean up when it's wet than when it's dry. Now I'm going to take a clamp, and I'm going to put it on the knot to try and hold it down. Just put a little bit more super glue in the corners around where I see it fraying. What I'm trying to avoid is putting the super glue where my hands are going to press on it. I find it to be pretty uncomfortable. It gets sharp. It eventually can wear away, and you can sand it down too. But anyway, yeah, there we go. So we'll see how tactfully wonderful this comes out. I'm going to then just kind of turn it upside down and let it sit with some sort of pressure on the cap, and hopefully that's gonna kind of keep the cap straight. All right, so I have my habaki and I have my saya right here, and I'm going to attempt to fix some things. So first, I'm going to do this bit right here, which is basically trying to fit the habaki in this area so it is tight, and that's what I'm going to do. So basically that means I have to shim this area right here. Now earlier I had mentioned that this little strip of paper is the bee's knees, and ideally you have wood glue or some other type of adhesive than super glue, but I don't have wood glue around right now and I don't want to go get any. So I'm going to use this, and I'm going to stuff it in there, and we'll see what happens. All right, so you can see I broke it off a little bit too big. That's all right. So this stuff is pretty thin, so I can just pull the strip off or shave it down a little bit. So I have something that fits in. I'm basically putting the habaki in like it's attached to the sword, seeing if it creates enough tension. So now this feels reasonably tight. All right, so I'm taking a little super glue and I'm putting a bead in there. And then I got this thing. I'm gonna take this and slide it in a ways. Try not to get super glue all over myself. Now I also tend to just take the habaki and put it in. Oh. All right, so I will snip this part off. I'm going to leave it there for a second, see if I can get it to dry, and then I'll pull it out. What you can see though is that I just glued it on one side. I didn't do it on the back. I find it easiest to just glue on the front. I don't need it to have tension everywhere. I just need it along here. And honestly, this part of the blade is where I tend to cut the most and where it tends to be the most thin anyway. So filling in this section is where I find it just easiest to add. Well, that's drying. I'm going to address the kurikata right here, and you can see that it is in this particular case still kind of stuck in there in this little pocket. So I'm just going to put a dab of super glue in there and call it a day. Now again, normally wood glue is likely going to be a superior option here. I don't know that I would recommend using super glue for everything. I just don't happen to have wood glue, and it's handy for YouTube-y stuff where I can just set it in place and then call it a day, and it goes a little quicker. but wood glue would be a superior option in my mind. Now this is likely to bubble up and have some odd effects on the lacquer around here, but anyway, the Kurikata is about back where it was, and it doesn't move around so much now. I can't see what I'm doing. Okay. So cut this off. So I'm gonna clean this up with this file right here, and then this side of the file I can get in the saya and I can scrub it a little bit so that it's not as tight, because it seems like there's a little excess wood there. So that's what I'm gonna do. Check my habaki fit. All right, so I'm gonna leave this like this. You can see that the habaki's poking out a little bit so that I can get a pliers on there to grab it, and it's still applying pressure. When I get the stuff done, I'll put the blade back together, and I'll finish fit it when I have the actual sword to kind of grab onto as a handle. Another late edition add tool, when I said beautify this, so now this this super glue is quasi-dry, and here's basically the way I clean it up, and it's good from afar but far from good. And basically I just take the Sharpie and I scribble on things, and I press the Sharpie in to try and get the black to absorb. It has a small sheen to it, but it's certainly not great, but you can see that it for the most part is making it aesthetically better from a distance. All right, you're not going to fool anyone with this, but it doesn't look as bad when it's just sitting in your belt or when you're practicing with it, or if it's on your wall, you got to get close to it to see all this kind of garbage. But there you go. There's the MacGyvery kind of quick fix. Not ideal, but in a pinch, it works. One thing to note, I usually get these towels at Costco. There's a bag of them, but these shop towels are better for wiping stuff down. You don't scratch them like you would with just any kind of regular Bounty kind of towel or regular house towel. So you can wipe fingerprints off here without leaving a whole lot of marks. Now this scabbard does not look honestly all that bad, but you could use the same Mother's Mag polish on the surface of the scabbard if you wanted to shine it up. Just be aware that you can take off layers and stuff like that, so you want to be kind of gingerly with it, but you can shine it up with Mother's Mag or kind of an abrasive metal polish. You can clean up the scabbard. Sometimes buff out dings or buff out scratches using Mother's Mag. I'm not going to do that on this particular one because I don't see a lot of cause to do it, and I'm kind of thinking that the lacquer in this example is pretty thin, so I don't know how much it's going to hold up to. But just know if you had some light scratches that aren't kind of down to the wood, you might be able to rub a little Mother's Mag on there and even it out. I've done that on a few scabbards, but you do have to be gingerly with it. Okay, next bit, you can see that this sword has a bunch of markings on it from where I measured things. And so I'm going to clean it off, and what I use to clean it off is Mother's Mag. Now, the cleaning kits always come with these like Uchiko powder balls. Honestly, I never use them. I never do anything with them. I find them to be pretty pointless. I use Mother's Mag, and basically it's widely available at most auto parts stores. This one is old and nasty, and I grab a shop towel and I dip it in the Mother's Mag. Get some on the towel here, and then I just wipe the Mother's Mag over the surface of the blade. Now, things that you want to bear in mind, the Mother's Mag is an aggressive polish. There are other polishes that you can use as well. Flitz, Metal Glow, there's a lot of different polishes out there, and all of them do about the same thing. I find Mother's Mag to be one of the less aggressive in my experience. It's also not good to do inside. It has to me, it kind of smells, and I'm dropping it all over the place, and I'm probably going to stain my clothes. But anyway, basic gist, I move it all over the blade here, and just right away, I'm seeing that the Sharpie marks that I have on the sword are gone. So it removed the Sharpie very, very quickly, and it's just going to remove some of the gunk and buildup. Now, I don't I don't go over it. I'm not pressing very hard. I just take the towel. I'm being very gingerly. This is a lot easier with a Japanese style sword or a single edge blade because you can go from one side with some degree of safety, but you still want to be even, so I turn it around, and I'm being very cautious about the edge and pressure so I don't cut myself. I try not to let my ADD kick in. Now I'm also trying not to go to the edge. I'm trying to leave the edge alone, at least for the most part. This is an abrasive, and so if I'm not cautious, I could be dulling the edge pretty easily. So I'm trying to stay away from the edge, you know, at least not just run straight over it with anything. That's something I'm cognizant of, but you know, The mother's mag can be a bit of a pain in the ass to actually wipe all the way off. I'm not usually too worried about it. If it stays on the blade, a little extra oil on there isn't going to hurt anything, and it acts as a protective. But you could, you know, wipe it with Windex or isopropyl alcohol or something like that if you wanted whatever residue from the mother's mag gone. So a couple quick passes with mother's mag, and here are the results. You can see that this is not much of a blade to look at anyway. It hasn't taken off these surface scratches. They're still there, but it did remove, you know, some of the schmutz from cutting and all of the Sharpie that I had on there from my measurements. So this is another fun joy of taking them apart. I've taken it apart, and now I have some super rattle where I didn't before. Anyway, that's where I am with this sword here. Hopefully it stays together. We'll see in just a minute. I'm going to let it dry, and then we'll check back later. The Tsuba got a little bit of wiggle, and I was kind of content to just skip that over, but I thought, what the fuck, let's go back and show some of how I would resolve this with the tools that I have. I'm also actually going to lacquer the Ito here because it's a little, well, it's not horribly loose, but it's loose enough where I think, hey, if I lacquer it together, maybe this thing will hold together a little bit longer. So I'm going to do those fixes. I'm going to splice this video and all this stuff together, but this is going to be a goofy thing where I will try to go over some of the repairs of how I got this sword back into more comfortable condition. So that's the idea. Here we go. All right, sword friends, I have very delicately taken the Tsuba off, as you can tell, and I've made a slight mark on one side because, in my case, I can't tell which is the front and which one is the back. Some Tsuba, you can clearly identify which one's which. In this particular case, I cannot, and it's important because you only adjust one side. Now, because this side is what butts up to the habaki, if I tighten it here, that's kind of the thickest part of the blade, it's going to help me prevent the wiggly Tsuba that I'm experiencing now. You'll also notice I've got this piece of railroad tie here. You don't need to do this on a railroad tie. You need to do it because you're going to pound on it with something, so it's got to be backed or reinforced in some way. You could do it on a piece of wood. You could put a towel or a paper towel underneath to protect it. I could take some duct tape and wrap it around here to protect it. I'm just not going to. But do know, proper procedure, if you don't want to get this marred up or diminished, would be to protect it in some way and to do it on some sort of surface that isn't a big piece of metal. So do know that. Anyway, I'm not going to because I don't want to. So on this Tsuba, we're going to kind of whack it in 4 places. It's on each of the little corners. There's not really 4 corners. It looks like a triangle, but I'm going to whack it right here. I'm going to whack it here. I'm going to pinch this corner and this one. And I'm probably going to mess it up, and it's going to be really loud, and it's going to shake my camera, and I hope things don't fall down. But in a nutshell, if I whack this and push the metal in ever so slightly, then it's going to be stiffer on the sword. It's going to have it's going to be a smaller hole for the thing to fit through, which then should make it tight. Those are the words I think I'm looking for. Okay, so let's start here. Also, you might notice I'm using a nail set and a hammer. That's the tools. All right, very glamorous here. So you can kind of see the 4 points that I have hit in, and hopefully it's deformed the metal enough to to be tighter. Alright, so this, believe it or not, is not ideal, but it's better. So now the Tsuba is tight at this point. It doesn't want to move around. So I use a rubber mallet and point the sword away from me. Give it a little bit of a whack. Okay, doesn't seem to be wiggling now. All right, now one other thing I can do here is I can try and create a small shim for the lateral movement. What I'm doing here is I'm cutting out a piece of duct tape to fit in as a small spacer underneath this Fuchi area here. You can see I'm very graceful about it as well. Alright, the finest work. Take the sword, take this guy here. Alright, sword friends, so the important bit here is now I have no wiggle. Everything is tight. Nothing rattles. Everything seems pretty solid. I am going to take the sword apart again because I want to replace the Makugi with something that doesn't appear to be as worn and beat up. The replacement one that I brought out is too small. But everything is tight. Nothing, the Tsuba doesn't wiggle under pressure horizontally or vertically. And the Kashira appears on. I'm going to take this off and I'm going to lacquer the grip a little bit. Lacquering, what is that? Well, I happen to have just a little bit left in this can. That should be enough, and basically I've got my handle here. I'm going to set it, and then I'm going to spray it with lacquer, and that's really it. It doesn't take but a couple passes with the lacquer. Maybe it's just going to, I don't know what exactly it's going to do. I'm probably going to spray it all over everything here, generally speaking. As a makeshift lacquering chamber. Right, so what is lacquer? Well, you can see I've got this in a complete and total isolated lacquer chamber because I'm amazing at this. Anyway, I have a little bit of lacquer left in this can. This isn't anything fancy, it's just what I happen to have left over, but you can buy a lacquer in a can, and I just didn't want to get it all over everything. So, I'm going to clean this off because it looks like it's dirty, and I don't want to lacquer on all the dirt. I've got this thing stuck in a box as an attempt to act as a lacquer chamber so that I don't spray it all over everything, including my camera stuff, which I will probably do anyway. But you can see I'm just doing a couple passes, and there's not really much in this can. Alright, sword friends, a slight change of plans happened. When I ran out of this can of lacquer, I'm kind of glad I did because it was kind of shooting up out of the box into my face, and I was worried that it would get on my camera equipment, which would not be ideal to scrape lacquer off a lens. So I found another can of lacquer, and I just went outside off camera, held it with my pliers kind of stuck up in where the sword would normally go, and then I just doused it back and forth with lacquer a couple passes. And this is the result while it's wet. So I'm going to let it dry. It looks like it's picked up little bits of dust here and there. I might be able to sand it a little once it's dried off, but I got to let it dry for a day, and then I'll come back and check it out. And hopefully it is secure and the Ito will be tighter, and at least it will hold up marginally longer than it would otherwise. Anyway, more to come. I will pause for now and come back later. Alright there, sword friends, it is now the future, and the enamel or lacquer or whatever I put on the handle has dried. And I've done a couple other bits and bobs, if you will. One, while the sword was out, I actually took it to my belt sander in the corner and I gave it a slight bit of sharpening, and you can see that the sword is now not as dull as it was. I basically took, well, there's a lot of different ways to sharpening, and I'm no particular expert, but I had a belt sander, a 1000 grit belt, and a strop belt with jeweler's rouge on it, and now the sword is sharper. I also took a little bit of, well, something that is effectively like the packing material on this, whatever this happens to be. It's not quite bubble wrap, but it is a plastic thing, and I stuffed it down the end of the scabbard so that rattle is mitigated. It doesn't sound like it, but believe me, it's marginally less rattly than it was before. The stuff down at the base hopefully isn't gonna retain a lot of water. It doesn't look like there's a lot of pockets for it to get stuck in, and it's ever so slightly quieter. You can also see that the blade doesn't fall out, but it comes out without a lot of pressure. And if the camera is working here, I can zoom in more. This is hard as a rock. This does not move around in terms of the Ito at all. It doesn't move in the slightest. It is on there very firm, and the Tsuba rattle has been corrected. The sword is not particularly comfortable. I don't really like the feeling of this rock hard Ito, but it's all right actually. I mean, it's not as kind of sandy rough. It has a less than pleasant aroma to it at the moment, as in it smells like wet lacquer. But hopefully it'll dry and smell less crappy, less chemicalicious over time. Anyway, for the moment, it seems like the Fuchi doesn't move around. The knot, this kind of wiggly bit at the end down here, is tightened, and all of these issues really have been corrected. All right, the additional work around my Kurikata is done. It's glued on. It feels stable. I glued on these little shitadome so I can move this Sageo in and out, and it doesn't pop the little pieces out. And, you know, basically the Sharpie work is going to fool you from afar, but it's not going to do much up close. Really not much about this sword is terribly attractive up close, but as a practitioner user piece, now the Ito appears stable, albeit smellier. Everything seems tight. There's no creaks or anything like that in the Nikago with the shim, kind of the paper that it already had there. The saya is tensioned about right. It's still rattly a little bit, but serviceable, and everything's ready to go. I gave it a little bit of sharpening, so I'd be guessing it's probably going to cut better if I'm cutting newspaper or other targets. Anyway, it's got a better edge, and while it looks like a secondary bevel on here, probably because it is, I don't know if it's actually going to come through in the camera or not. Well, it is a secondary bevel. It's not a huge one. I used kind of the slack portion of the belt. Hopefully it preserves some of the geometry of the blade and didn't create just a big steep secondary bevel. I can't really tell. I'm not great at sharpening, but I managed not to mar it up and make a bunch of crazy, terrible divots and stuff in the blade. So I'm at least happy with the edge being reasonably straight. Anyway, at the moment I'm going to call this good. It's at least in better condition than it was. I was unable to replace the Kurikata, mostly because all of the chopsticks and wood and substitutes that I have aren't actually thick enough. They all fall through, and so I'm going to have to find some other bit of metal or something to replace it with. So I stuffed the broken, kind of not great one in there, and I guess it's going to hold up for a little while longer. Anyway, as it is, those are some quick MacGyver things. Obviously, I didn't show you the sharpening. I've showed that in other videos, but you should probably watch somebody more competent in sharpening. I did it to this one, but I'm not going to include it in this video. The rest of them, MacGyver fixes. Hopefully they help you out. That's all I've got. As always, cheers, and thanks for watching.